Welcome to the Lit Breakdown. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating books on human behavior and decision-making. Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, by Robert Cialdini. Have you ever wondered why people say yes, even when it doesn't make sense? Or why we buy products, follow trends, or trust certain people without thinking? The truth is, human behavior follows patterns, predictable shortcuts, and automatic responses that shape almost every choice we make. In this audiobook series, we'll break down each of the key principles of influence: reciprocation, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, commitment and consistency, unity, and instant influence. You'll learn how these principles work, why they affect your decisions, and how to recognize them in everyday life. By the end of this series, you'll have the tools to understand influence, protect yourself from manipulation, and make smarter, more intentional decisions. So, get ready to discover the hidden psychology behind persuasion and human behavior, because once you see it, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Chapter 1. Levers of Influence. Human beings are constantly being influenced. Every day we make decisions that feel like our own choices, but many of them are shaped by subtle psychological forces operating beneath our awareness. Robert Cialdini begins this book by explaining a simple but powerful idea. People often say yes, not because they carefully analyzed a situation, but because a specific psychological trigger was activated. These triggers exist because the world is complex. We are surrounded by information, choices, and demands on our attention. To function efficiently, the human brain relies on mental shortcuts, automatic rules that help us decide quickly without deep analysis. Most of the time, these shortcuts are useful, but they also make us predictable. Cialdini calls these shortcuts levers of influence. When the right lever is pulled, people tend to respond in a consistent and automatic way. This doesn't mean people are weak or unintelligent. It means they are human. One of the most important ideas in this chapter is that automatic behavior is not rare. It is the default. We often act first and think later. When certain cues are present, we comply almost instantly, without realizing why. Influence works best not when people are convinced logically, but when they are triggered psychologically. Cialdini identifies several core levers that drive this automatic behavior. The first is reciprocation. When someone gives us something, we feel an obligation to give something back. This response is deeply ingrained across cultures. Even an unsolicited or small favor can create a powerful sense of indebtedness. This is why free samples, gifts, and favors are so effective. They activate the need to reciprocate, often leading to compliance. Another lever is commitment and consistency. Once people make a choice, especially publicly or in writing, they feel pressure to behave in ways that are consistent with that choice. A small commitment can lead to much larger actions later, not because the person carefully reevaluated the situation, but because they want to remain consistent with their previous behavior. Social proof is another powerful shortcut. When people are unsure what to do, they look to others for guidance. If many people are doing something, we assume it must be the correct choice. This is especially strong in uncertain or unfamiliar situations. Popularity, trends, reviews, and group behavior all signal what is right, often overriding independent judgment. The lever of liking explains why people are more easily influenced by those they find attractive, friendly, similar, or familiar. We tend to trust and agree with people we like, even when the request itself has nothing to do with the reason we like them. Simple things like compliments, shared interests, or repeated exposure can increase compliance. Authority is another shortcut the brain relies on. Titles, uniforms, expertise, and professional status signal credibility. When authority cues are present, people are more likely to obey instructions or accept information without question. This response is automatic and can be powerful enough to override personal judgment. Finally, scarcity increases desire. When something appears limited, rare, or available for only a short time, it feels more valuable. Scarcity creates urgency and triggers fear of missing out, pushing people to act quickly rather than rationally. Cialdini makes it clear that these levers are not inherently good or bad. They are tools. They can be used ethically to guide decisions, or manipulatively to exploit automatic reactions. The key difference is awareness. The purpose of this chapter is not to make you suspicious of every interaction, but to help you recognize when these levers are being pulled. Once you understand them, you are no longer operating on autopilot. You gain the ability to pause, evaluate, and choose intentionally. To sum it up, humans rely on mental shortcuts to navigate a complex world. These shortcuts, reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority and scarcity, trigger automatic responses that make influence predictable and powerful. Understanding these levers helps you recognize when influence is at work, avoid unconscious compliance, and make decisions with greater awareness and control. Chapter 2. Reciprocation. One of the strongest forces guiding human behavior is the need to return favors. Robert Cialdini introduces reciprocation as a core lever of influence because it operates automatically and powerfully across cultures, ages, and social groups. At its core, reciprocation is simple. When someone gives us something, we feel compelled to give something back. This reaction is not taught formally. It is ingrained in us from an early age. Societies rely on it to function smoothly. Without reciprocation, cooperation would break down. The important point Cialdini makes is this: the feeling of obligation does not depend on the size or value of what was given. Even a small, unexpected gesture can trigger a strong need to repay. For example, when a stranger gives you a free sample, you may feel subtle pressure to buy the product. Rationally, you know the sample was meant to promote sales. Emotionally, however, the act of receiving something creates a sense of debt. That debt often gets repaid with a purchase. This principle works even when the favor was unsolicited. You do not have to ask for help to feel obligated afterward. Once something is given, the pressure to reciprocate begins automatically. Cialdini describes studies where people agreed to unreasonable or costly requests simply because they had received a small favor beforehand. The initial gift shifted the balance of the interaction. Saying no afterward felt uncomfortable, even when it was against their best interest. Reciprocation also explains why people are more willing to comply with a request after a concession. If someone starts with a large request and then backs down to a smaller one, the second request feels like a compromise. Even though the person planned it that way, we feel obligated to reciprocate the concession by agreeing. This technique is often used in negotiations, sales, and everyday interactions. It works because our minds treat concessions as favors that need to be repaid. The danger of reciprocation is that it can override judgment. People often agree to things they don't want, don't need, or can't afford simply to relieve the discomfort of obligation. The decision feels emotional, not logical. Cialdini emphasizes that awareness is the solution. Understanding that reciprocation is a psychological reflex, not a moral obligation, gives you control. You are allowed to separate the favor from the request. Accepting a gift does not require accepting a deal. Reciprocation is most powerful when it operates invisibly. Once you recognize it, you can pause, assess the situation, and decide whether compliance actually makes sense. To sum it up, Reciprocation is the instinctive need to return favors. Even small or unsolicited gestures can create powerful feelings of obligation that lead to compliance. Recognizing this principle allows you to separate kindness from pressure and make decisions based on choice rather than emotional debt. Chapter 3. Liking. People are far more likely to say yes to someone they like. Robert Cialdini explains that liking is one of the simplest yet most powerful levers of influence because it operates quietly and emotionally rather than logically. At its core, this principle is straightforward. We prefer to agree with people we feel good about. When we like someone, we tend to trust them more, listen more closely, and lower our guard. As a result, their requests feel reasonable, even when we might reject the same request from someone else. Liking is influenced by several key factors, and each one increases the likelihood of compliance. One major factor is physical attractiveness. Studies consistently show that attractive people are perceived as more intelligent, trustworthy, and competent, even when there is no evidence to support those assumptions. This is known as the halo effect. When someone appears attractive, positive traits are automatically assigned to them, making their influence stronger. Another powerful factor is similarity. We are more easily influenced by people who seem like us. Shared backgrounds, interests, beliefs, or experiences create a sense of connection. Even small similarities, such as liking the same music or growing up in a similar place, can significantly increase trust and agreement. Compliments also increase liking. Genuine praise makes people feel good, and those positive feelings often get associated with the person delivering them. What's important is that compliments do not have to be deep or meaningful to work. Even simple or obvious praise can increase compliance because it activates positive emotion. Familiarity plays a role as well. The more often we see someone, the more comfortable we feel around them. Repeated exposure creates a sense of trust, even without meaningful interaction. This is why brands, public figures, and advertisers focus on visibility. Familiarity breeds liking. Cialdini also explains the power of association. When a person, product, or message is linked to something positive, success, happiness, status, or admired figures, we tend to transfer those positive feelings automatically. This is why endorsements work. It's not logic that persuades us, it's emotional association. The danger of the liking principle is that it can cloud judgment. When we like someone, we are less critical of their motives and more willing to overlook flaws, risks, or warning signs. We may agree to requests that don't benefit us simply because saying no feels uncomfortable. Cialdini emphasizes that liking should not be confused with trustworthiness. A likable person is not automatically honest, competent, or acting in your best interest. Awareness allows you to separate how you feel about someone from the actual merits of their request. Understanding this principle does not mean rejecting warmth or connection. It means recognizing when positive feelings are influencing your decisions so you can choose intentionally rather than emotionally. To sum it up, liking increases influence. Physical attractiveness, similarity, compliments, familiarity, and positive associations all make people more persuasive. When we like someone, we lower our defenses and are more likely to comply. Recognizing this principle helps us separate emotional connection from sound decision-making. Chapter 4. Social Proof. When people are unsure about what to do, they look to others for guidance. Robert Cialdini explains this behavior through the principle of social proof, one of the most powerful and common levers of influence. At its core, social proof is the idea that we decide what is correct by observing what other people think is correct. Instead of carefully analyzing every situation, the brain uses group behavior as a shortcut. If many people are doing something, it feels safe to assume it must be the right choice. This tendency becomes strongest in moments of uncertainty. When the situation is unclear or unfamiliar, we rely more heavily on the actions of others. The less confident we feel, the more persuasive social proof becomes. For example, consider online reviews. When choosing between two products, most people will select the one with more positive reviews, even if they know nothing else about it. The crowd's approval signals quality and reliability, often replacing independent evaluation. Social proof also explains why trends spread so quickly. When people see something becoming popular, they interpret popularity as validation. The more visible the behavior, the more legitimate it appears. This creates a cycle where popularity fuels more popularity. Cialdini highlights how social proof operates in group settings. In experiments, individuals often conform to group opinions, even when those opinions are clearly incorrect. The pressure to fit in, avoid standing out, or avoid conflict can overpower personal judgment. This effect is even stronger when the people being observed are perceived as similar. We are more influenced by the behavior of people we identify with than by strangers or outsiders. If people like us are doing something, it feels especially correct. Social proof can be useful. It helps people make decisions quickly, avoid danger, and learn acceptable behavior. But it also has a dangerous side. Following the crowd without thinking can lead to poor decisions, panic behavior, or widespread mistakes. Cialdini explains that social proof can fail catastrophically when everyone is looking to everyone else for guidance. In these situations, no one acts independently, even when action is necessary. Silence or inaction spreads simply because it appears to be the norm. The solution is awareness. Social proof should be treated as information, not instruction. Just because many people believe something does not mean it is true. Just because many people are doing something does not mean it is wise. Recognizing social proof allows you to pause and ask a critical question. Are others acting because they know something, or because they are also unsure? To sum it up, social proof is the tendency to follow the behavior of others, especially in uncertain situations. Popularity, trends, and group behavior act as shortcuts that shape decisions. Understanding this principle helps you avoid blindly following the crowd and make choices based on judgment rather than imitation. Chapter 5. Authority. People have a natural tendency to follow authority. Robert Cialdini explains that authority is one of the strongest levers of influence because it triggers automatic obedience rather than careful evaluation. From an early age, we are taught that obeying authority figures is necessary for order and safety. Parents, teachers, leaders, and experts are all presented as sources of guidance. Over time, this conditioning becomes automatic. When we encounter signs of authority, we often comply without questioning. Authority works because the brain uses it as a shortcut. Instead of evaluating information independently, we assume that someone with expertise or status knows better. Titles, uniforms, credentials, and professional appearances all signal authority, even when actual competence is unknown. For example, people are more likely to follow instructions from someone wearing a lab coat or uniform than from someone dressed casually. The clothing itself carries symbolic meaning. It suggests knowledge, legitimacy, and control, which increases compliance. Expert endorsements work in the same way. When a product is recommended by a doctor, specialist, or professional, people are more likely to trust it, even if they don't fully understand the reasoning. The presence of authority replaces the need for detailed analysis. Cialdini points to classic studies where individuals obeyed authority figures even when the instructions conflicted with their morals or common sense. These experiments demonstrate how powerful authority cues can be. People often defer responsibility, believing that the authority figure is accountable for the outcome. The danger of authority is that appearance often substitutes for substance. A title does not guarantee honesty, competence, or good intentions. Yet the brain responds to authority signals automatically, lowering skepticism. Cialdini emphasizes that respect for authority is not the problem. Blind obedience is. The key is learning to separate legitimate expertise from surface-level symbols of power. Awareness allows you to pause and ask critical questions. Is this person truly qualified? Are they acting in my best interest? Would this advice still make sense without the title or uniform? Authority should inform decisions, not replace them. To sum it up, authority influences behavior by triggering automatic trust and obedience. Titles, uniforms, and expertise act as shortcuts that reduce critical thinking. Recognizing authority cues helps you evaluate advice more carefully and avoid compliance based solely on appearance or status. Chapter 6. Scarcity. Scarcity has a powerful effect on human behavior. Robert Cialdini explains that when something appears limited, rare, or fleeting, our desire for it increases automatically. This reaction is not logical. It is emotional and instinctive. At its core, scarcity works because we place higher value on things that are harder to obtain. When access is restricted, the brain interprets it as a signal that the item or opportunity must be valuable. This triggers urgency and pushes people to act quickly, often without careful thought. One common example is limited time offers. When people are told an opportunity is only available for a short period, they feel pressure to decide immediately. The fear of missing out becomes stronger than the desire to evaluate the decision rationally. Scarcity also increases value when something becomes newly unavailable. If an opportunity was once accessible and then restricted, desire intensifies. Losing access feels more painful than never having had it at all. This is why sudden restrictions or exclusive access can dramatically increase demand. Cialdini explains that scarcity doesn't just affect purchasing decisions. It influences relationships, status, and attention as well. When something or someone is perceived as rare or in high demand, its perceived worth rises. The danger of scarcity is that it narrows focus. When people feel rushed, they focus on what they might gain and ignore what they might lose. Risks are downplayed, alternatives are ignored, and long-term consequences are overlooked. Scarcity is often manufactured intentionally. Marketers, negotiators, and persuaders frequently create artificial limits to trigger urgency. When people are unaware of this tactic, they are more likely to comply impulsively. Awareness restores control. Recognizing scarcity cues allows you to slow down and ask whether the limitation is real or engineered. Time pressure should not replace thoughtful evaluation. To sum it up, scarcity increases desire by creating urgency and fear of missing out. Limited availability and restricted access trigger emotional responses that override logic. Understanding this principle helps you recognize when urgency is being used to influence your decisions and allows you to choose thoughtfully rather than reactively. Chapter 7. Commitment and Consistency. People have a deep desire to act consistently with what they have already said or done. Robert Cialdini explains that this principle is one of the most reliable levers of influence, because consistency is closely tied to identity. At its core, commitment and consistency work because people want to see themselves and be seen by others as reliable and stable. Once a decision is made, changing course creates discomfort. To avoid that discomfort, people often stick with choices even when those choices no longer serve them. This influence becomes especially powerful after a commitment has been made publicly or in writing. Public commitments create social pressure, while written commitments feel more permanent and binding. The more visible the commitment, the harder it becomes to reverse. Cialdini explains that small commitments are often used to secure larger ones. When someone agrees to a small request, their self-image shifts. They begin to see themselves as the type of person who supports a cause, buys a product, or agrees to a position. Larger requests then feel like a natural continuation rather than a new decision. This principle is widely used in sales, marketing, and negotiations. Simple actions, such as checking a box, signing a form, or verbally agreeing, can create a psychological anchor that pulls future behavior in the same direction. Consistency also operates internally. People want their beliefs, actions, and self-image to align. When they don't, discomfort arises. Instead of re-evaluating the original decision, many people rationalize their behavior to maintain consistency. The danger of this principle is that it can lock people into poor decisions. Past commitments can become traps, leading individuals to continue investing time, money, or effort simply because they have already done so. Cialdini emphasizes that consistency should serve values, not override them. Awareness allows you to separate who you are from what you have previously agreed to. Recognizing this lever gives you permission to change your mind when new information emerges. To sum it up, commitment and consistency drive people to align future actions with past decisions. Small commitments create powerful psychological pressure to follow through. Understanding this principle helps you recognize when consistency is influencing your behavior and allows you to reassess choices instead of staying stuck in them. Chapter 8. Unity. Unity is the principle that people are most influenced by those they see as part of their own group. Robert Cialdini explains that unity goes beyond liking or similarity. It is about shared identity, the sense of we, rather than you and me. At its core, unity works because humans are social beings. From an evolutionary perspective, belonging to a group meant survival. Those who were part of a tribe were protected, supported, and accepted. As a result, the brain developed a strong preference for people who feel like family, teammates, or insiders. When unity is present, influence becomes much stronger. Requests coming from someone within our group feel different from requests coming from an outsider. We are more willing to help, cooperate, and sacrifice for people we identify with. Cialdini explains that unity is created through shared identity, not just shared traits. Family, close friendships, cultural background, religion, nationality, team membership, and shared struggles all create bonds that increase influence. The stronger the sense of us, the easier compliance becomes. For example, people are more likely to support a cause when it is framed as something we believe in, rather than something they are being asked to adopt. Language matters. Words like we, us, and our signal unity and trigger loyalty. Unity is also strengthened through shared experiences. Going through challenges together, celebrating wins together, or facing adversity as a group deepens the bond. These shared moments create emotional connections that make influence feel natural rather than forced. This principle explains why people often make sacrifices for family members or close communities that they would never make for strangers. The request feels personal, not transactional. The danger of unity is that it can reduce critical thinking. When a request comes from someone inside our group, we are less likely to question motives or consequences. Loyalty can override logic. Group identity can also lead to exclusion, bias, or blind obedience to group norms. Cialdini emphasizes that unity should be acknowledged without being abused. Shared identity is powerful, but it should not eliminate independent judgment. Belonging does not require blind agreement. Awareness allows you to recognize when unity is influencing your decisions and to ask whether the request truly aligns with your values or is simply appealing to group loyalty. To sum it up, unity is the influence created by shared identity and belonging. People are more likely to comply with those they see as part of their group. Shared values, language, and experiences strengthen this effect. Understanding unity helps you recognize when group identity is guiding your decisions and allows you to balance loyalty with independent thinking. Chapter 9. Instant Influence. Humans do not always think before they act. In fact, much of human behavior is automatic. Robert Cialdini refers to this phenomenon as instant influence, the process by which people respond quickly to certain cues without conscious analysis. At its core, instant influence exists because the brain is designed for efficiency. Every day, we face countless decisions. If we carefully analyzed each one, we would become overwhelmed. To cope, the brain relies on shortcuts, automatic responses that have worked well in the past. These shortcuts are not random. They are built from repeated experiences and reinforced by survival, social norms, and learning. When the right cue appears, the brain activates a pre-programmed response and moves forward without pause. Cialdini explains that the levers of influence, reciprocation, liking, social proof, authority, commitment and consistency, scarcity, and unity, are especially effective because they trigger these automatic reactions. When one or more of these cues are present, people often comply instantly. For example, a limited-time offer triggers urgency. A request from an authority figure triggers obedience. A favor triggers obligation. These reactions feel natural and justified in the moment, even when the decision is not fully thought through. Instant influence is not always harmful. In many situations, it helps us function smoothly. We trust experts, follow social norms, and cooperate with others without needing constant analysis. This efficiency allows society to operate. The problem arises when these automatic responses are intentionally activated for manipulation. Persuaders often design situations to trigger instant influence before people have time to reflect. Speed becomes a weapon. Urgency, pressure, and emotional cues are used to bypass rational thinking. Cialdini emphasizes that the most dangerous influence is the one we don't notice. When people believe they are making a free, rational choice, but are actually reacting automatically, influence becomes invisible and powerful. The solution is not to eliminate shortcuts, but to recognize when they are being used. Awareness creates a pause. That pause allows conscious thought to re-enter the process. By learning the principles of influence, you gain the ability to slow down automatic reactions. You begin to notice when urgency feels forced, when authority is superficial, or when obligation is being engineered. Instant influence loses its power once it is seen. To sum it up, instant influence occurs when automatic mental shortcuts drive decisions without conscious thought. The principles of influence work because they trigger these fast reactions. Recognizing when automatic responses are activated allows you to pause, think critically, and make decisions based on intention rather than reflex. Influence is not about control. It's about understanding. Throughout this audiobook, you've learned that human behavior follows patterns. We rely on shortcuts. We respond automatically to certain cues. And most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. Reciprocation, liking, social proof, authority, scarcity, commitment and consistency, unity and instant influence are not tricks. They are psychological forces that shape everyday decisions, what we buy, who we trust, and how we respond to others. The real power of this knowledge is awareness. When you recognize these principles at work, you gain the ability to pause. You can separate emotion from decision. You can choose intentionally instead of reacting automatically. This understanding doesn't just protect you from manipulation. It also allows you to communicate more clearly, persuade more ethically, and build stronger relationships. Influence is always present. The difference is whether you are being guided by it or guided by awareness. If you found this audiobook helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below sharing your biggest takeaway. Your support helps me bring you more content like this. The choice is yours. Start using your awareness today.